Are you ready to become a change maker? Our 48-week postgraduate program in public policy or the PGP may be just the thing for you. This hybrid program is designed to give you both the theoretical foundation and hands-on experience needed to excel in policy making. With a mix of expert-led webinars, in-person workshops, and policy simulation exercises, you'll gain real-world skills along with personalized mentorship. Through our policy programs, we connect good people to good ideas and good networks. Apply now at the link in the description to make an impact.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of All Things Policy. I'm Aishwaria Sonavane, research analyst for Pakistan Studies at the Takshashila Institution, and your host for today. As you've already seen from the title, we'll be unpacking India's recent military actions against Pakistan following the April 22 Pahalgam attack, in which 26 civilians were killed. This incident has marked a significant inflection point in India's counter-terrorism posture. To help us unpack and make sense of the strategic shifts that are underway, I'm joined by Dr. Happymon Jacob, a distinguished academic, strategic affairs commentator, and one of the most foremost voices on India-Pakistan relations. He's the founder and director of the Council for Strategic and Defense Research in New Delhi, and also serves as a professor of diplomacy and disarmament at the JNU in New Delhi. Dr. Jacob, thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure, Aishwarya. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Fantastic. I want to begin with your article titled 12 Arguments to Make Sense of Operation Sindoor, which for our listeners, we have linked it below the podcast. Dr. Jacob, you described the operation as a major doctrinal shift in India's military response to terrorism. Can you walk us through the key strategic objectives of this operation and how it marks a departure from India's previous military responses, such as the 2016 surgical strikes or the 2019 Balakot airstrikes?
Actually, thank you for that question. I am of the opinion that there is an emerging new conventional doctrine that India appears to be adopting over the last 9 to 10 years or so, in order to put together a viable strategy vis-a-vis the Pakistani or Pakistan-based terrorist groups carrying out attacks against India on Indian soil. If you were to compare the Indian responses to the 0102 2001-2002 crisis, which is in the wake of the Parliament attack in 2001 December, and the Indian response after the 26/11 strikes in Mumbai, terrorist strikes in Mumbai, and compare those to the last three instances of major terror attacks in 2016, number of attacks in Jammu and Kashmir, which led to the surgical strikes, and the 2019 Pulwama attack on the CRPF soldiers, which led to the attack on Balakot in Pakistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, and the recent attack in response to the Pahalgam terrorist attack. When you compare the two sets of terror attacks, what stands out for me is that Delhi has decided that it is going to shun its strategic restraint in responding to terrorism emanating from Pakistan. For me, that's a major doctrinal shift for a variety of reasons. Number one, India used to be concerned about what the international community would say, how they would respond to an Indian conventional attack towards Pakistan. I think that concern about what the international community would think has almost totally disappeared, number one. Number two, the Pakistanis have always played up their nuclear power, their nuclear weapons, as a potential option to respond to Indian conventional strikes. The entire argument that the Pakistanis used to make about full spectrum deterrence, tactical nuclear weapons. There was even at a certain point of time in mid 2000s the argument about forward deployment and pre-delegation of nuclear weapon launch authority to local commanders, etc., etc. Now, the Indian side was unable to overcome this dilemma of how to respond to the Pakistani nuclear threat because Pakistan does not have a nuclear doctrine. Pakistan that has not clearly identified what the red lines are. The red lines that General Khalid Kidwai has identified are, or in some ways, too broad based to have any specificities built into it. So this dilemma dawned on India, even when India sort of had a cold start doctrine, not an officially adopted one, but people used to talk about it within the defense circles that India is adopting or has adopted a cold start doctrine, which would have meant that Indians would sort of carve out a small area in POK in response to a Pakistani terrorist attack and negotiate with the Pakistanis to return that territory in return for Pakistan taking credible action against terrorists on the other side. All of that has suddenly disappeared. The Indian side is apparently no more concerned about the nuclear bluff from the Pakistani side. So that's a second element. India is saying that we don't care whether or not you're going to use or not use nuclear weapons. That's on you. We are going to respond to your sub-conventional attack using conventional weapon systems, and with the belief that it is unlikely to lead to a nuclear sort of exchange between the two sides. That's the second part of it. The third part of, I think, the doctrine today is that the Pakistanis have always maintained that there is a distinction between sub-conventional aggression and conventional aggression, meaning that there is a huge space between these two levels of aggression. The Pakistanis or Pakistan-based terrorist organizations, often at the behest of the Pakistan army, would undertake terrorist activities in India, and Pakistanis would say that we are not responsible for it. We don't know anything about it. This is just happening, autonomously because we are not in control of the terrorist organizations in our country. And therefore, for India to respond to that using conventional military force is uncalled for because you are punishing us for nothing. But that is, of course, again, a different kind of bluff. Now, India, I think, has called that bluff too, basically saying that if you use, or people you sponsor use, or people you house in your country use sub-conventional means to harm India, we reserve the right to use conventional weapons because we don't have sub-conventional actors on our side to sort of, engage in a like response. So we will use the power at our disposal, which is the conventional force, to ensure that this is not repeated, that the terrorism does not go unpunished. So India has in some ways done three things. It has called the two bluffs, which is the sub-conventional and conventional sort of difference that Pakistan always maintained, and the nuclear bluff, as it were, that it will sort of use the tactical nuclear weapons, etc., against India, should India were to use conventional force against Pakistan. And India has thirdly said that we don't worry too much about what the international reactions are. I would add a fourth element to that. I think the fourth element of that really is about the question of conclusive proof. International community is in a habit of asking India, where is the conclusive proof when it comes to determining whether the attack came from Pakistan, was directed by Pakistan, was sponsored by Pakistan. The Indian argument now seems to be that it's a threefold argument. One is that it is not possible for India to bring up or sort of put together forensic evidence immediately after an attack takes place. Forensic evidence will take a great deal of time. So by the time India gathers that forensic evidence, the time to respond to that kinetically would have long gone. And there's no point in responding at that later point of time, number one. Number two, Pakistan asked for evidence, and India has in the past given evidence to Pakistan. What has Pakistan done with that evidence? For instance, after the Mumbai attacks, Pakistan asked for evidence. India gave reams of evidence to Pakistan, and unfortunately, Pakistan hasn't done anything on the basis of that evidence. Mumbai trials are still languishing in Pakistani courts. Number two. Number three, the Indian side now appears to make the argument that the very fact that there are anti-India terror organizations in Pakistan, and Pakistan has not taken action, even if they could take action against those terrorist organizations, and the fact that they have routinely, there is evidence to show that the Pakistani deep state has nourished and sponsored many of these terrorist organizations to act out against it. Yeah, that general proof is good enough. That general evidence is good enough for India to determine that the Pakistani state is complicit in carrying out this attack, and therefore we reserve the right to attack conventionally, respond to that conventionally, without satisfying everybody on the question of proof. Put differently, India's putting the onus on Pakistan and is saying that it is for you to stop the sort of terrorism on your side if you don't want a conventional reprisal from our side. So I would sort of say that these are some of the major elements of this sort of the conventional new conventional doctrine that India is putting together. If I may add one more point, actually, before I give it back to you, and that I would say is it's sort of a tripwire situation that India has created for Pakistan. And what do I mean by a tripwire situation? It basically is that India now seems to be saying that should there be a future attack against India, India will use conventional military force against Pakistan. So this is the tripwire. If you cross that tripwire, the onus is on you, and you will get punished for that. So it is for you to not cross that line. So we are identifying what the line is: terrorist attacks on India. So therefore, put the ball in Pakistan's court and says, we are. This is a tripwire. Don't cross that. If you cross, this is the punishment. I think that clarity is intended to reinstate the deterrence against terror attacks from Pakistan that was lost as a result of the Pahalgam terror attack.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Jacob. I will come back to the concept of tripwire that you brilliantly mentioned in your article. Also, when you said that there are militant groups, terrorist groups operating inside Pakistan, just yesterday we saw some tweets where a US designated terrorist and Lashkar-e-Taiba commander Hafiz Abdul Rauf was leading funeral prayers for those who were killed in Indian strikes. So I think that definitely is.
Yeah.
But I want to come back to subconventional and conventional warfare,
Right.
where while some might in the Pakistani policy and security circles might accuse India of relying on subconventional warfares in Balochistan, but I will leave that aside for now. I want to understand from you, how do you think this shift will impact the future of India's military strategy, especially in relation to Pakistan's nuclear posture? And do you think this strategy could increase the risk of conflict escalation, or is it an effective deterrence policy?
I personally think that the job of nuclear weapons is to, nuclear weapons are political weapons. They are existential weapons, which means they are supposed to safeguard a country from ensuring that there is no attack from an adversary which will defeat the country totally, which will wipe the country off the face of the earth, which will basically ensure that the country doesn't exist anymore. So that is what nuclear weapons are supposed to do, in my understanding of what nuclear deterrence does. So nuclear weapons do not deter everything. Nuclear weapons do not deter terrorist attacks. Nuclear weapons do not deter low-scale conventional wars. It doesn't even deter, to my mind, a quick conventional sort of war between two adversaries. It will clearly deter the two sides from going into an all-out war. It will most definitely deter the one side using its nuclear weapons against the other side, because of the existence of what we call the second strike capability that the two sides have. And therefore, I'm not too worried about the Indian strategy leading to a situation where there is no control over escalation. I think escalation control is built into this strategy because what India is saying, for example, if you were to listen carefully about the statement that came out of the Indian side yesterday, was that this is a calibrated preemptive action against terrorist infrastructure on the Pakistani side, not intended not to harm civilians or to bring damage to military infrastructure on the other side. So that's a very carefully worded, carefully calibrated strategy, which means there is an inbuilt escalation control mechanism within that military strategy to begin with. So the next sort of level of the escalation is dependent on what Pakistan does next. If Pakistan clearly cannot attack any terrorist infrastructure on the Indian side because India doesn't have any. So if they attack a civilian infrastructure and cause civilian damage, that's going to be a problem. For the Indian side, India will have to hit back. If Pakistan attacks a military infrastructure or facility on the Indian side, depending on the damage, India will hit back. So I think what happens next will have to be determined very carefully by the Pakistani side because that is where the re-escalation is going to be a challenge. But I think, having been a student of military strategy, I don't think the Indian doctrine, the new doctrine of using conventional force to respond to subconventional aggression is inherently inherently escalatory. I don't think that is the case.
Dr. Jacob, you've also pointed out that India has moved beyond providing conclusive evidence to the international community regarding Pakistan's complicity in terror attacks, with the argument that the mere presence of anti-India groups on Pakistani soil justifies punitive military action. I want to understand what are the broader implications of this shift for India's foreign policy. And also how the way it impacts India's diplomatic engagement with the global community.
Just to qualify, I think it's not just the mere presence of anti-India terrorist groups on the Pakistani soil that attracts the Indian conventional strikes against Pakistan, but of course, the fact that there is enough evidence to show that these terrorist organizations have traditionally been, supported and sponsored and cultivated by the Pakistani deep state, and that they have carried out attacks on India, on the Indian soil, and they do continue to do that. And I think it's a result of that. So mere presence is not the issue here. But moving forward, I think if you look at the international system today, you have a unstable, let's say, chaotic sort of international system there is no one country, even though the United States is the most powerful country on planet Earth today with $24 trillion economy and the sort of largest military on planet Earth. It doesn't have the desire or to some extent even the ability to ensure that countries around the world listen to its diktat and behave accordingly. It's as Farid Zakaria would put it. It is not the decline of the United States as a power. It is the rise of others as powers that have somehow created the American inability to control everything in the international system. So if the Americans are unable to or unwilling to do that, and if there is a transatlantic rupture, as is the case today, and the international community is concerned more about what the Russians will do to Ukraine and what implications that will have on Europe and the sort of Gaza situation, etc. The situation between India and Pakistan, if you take the nuclear dimension out of it, is really way down the pecking order as far as the international community's attention span is concerned. The only reason they are concerned about India-Pakistan is because there are nuclear weapons involved. So if India can conclusively make the argument, doctrinally and otherwise, say, hey, nuclear weapons are not going to come into play, then I think much of the concern in the international community is going to be somewhat, will somewhat disappear pretty soon. But, I think the Indian, let me look at it somewhat differently from the Indian side. How is India sort of calibrating its global diplomacy and global diplomatic outreach in order to calibrate its conventional action against Pakistan? I think several things. Number one, India is, I think, saying it somewhat clearly that we are not really waiting for the international community's approval to decide what to do in terms of the reaction to a terrorist attack which killed innocent civilians on the Indian side. We are not going to sort of bend over backwards to find evidence and satisfy you, hey, here is the evidence, and therefore allow us to sort of go and strike Pakistan. That is also not the Indian side trying to do. There is also a big difference between the India of 2001 or India of 2008 to the India of 2025. India is a much larger economy today. India is taken far more seriously by the international community for a variety of reasons, be it the Global South, the Indo-Pacific, or the Quad, or thanks to the global geopolitics, India is a major player internationally. So India's ability to take a decision and stick with that, and to sort of tell its friends and partners that you must stand by us, I think is far more evident today than it was 10 or 15 years ago. So I think India has grown, the world has changed. The Pakistani side's ability to sell its narrative has somewhat declined. So I think the Indian sort of diplomacy internationally must be seen against the backdrop of these three issues, as I pointed out.
Right. I want to stick to the role of the international community for a moment. We saw Iran came out and offered to mediate. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Iran is currently the only country that has offered to mediate. And in your piece, Dr. Jacob, you also discuss the diminishing role of third parties in India's response to terrorism. So, in light of Operation Sindoor, how do you think India's strategic partners will need to adjust their positions on this conflict? And what role, well, if any, do you see for external actors in de-escalating tensions moving forward?
I think the international community, in particular India's strategic partners, will have to take a call in terms of how they are going to sort of respond to this. If they adopt the old style of responding to the India-Pakistan conflict, which is stand down, exercise restraint, and that they are going to keep sort of equidistance from India and Pakistan. I don't think India is going to be too pleased with that. I think India is going to tell the international community, and sort of I think that message is being subtly sent to them that. If you are India's partner, you must behave like a partner. The India strategic partnership is not only for accessing its markets or asking India to stand by you and stand with you when you are in trouble. It also means that India strategic partners should stand by India, and therefore. I think the choice that India is in some ways trying to give to the international community is that you must decide whose side are you on. Just like the Americans and the Europeans told India, you must decide whose side are you on. In some ways, if they would like India to be part of the various coalitions of willing in the Indo-Pacific or in sort of reshaping creating the new world order, etc. They will have to make that call. I think in their ability to have influence in Delhi going forward, their ability to have more empathetic hearing to their causes in Delhi going forward will depend on their behavior in the wake of what is happening today and probably will continue to happen for a few more days. I think after the initial sort of call for restraint and to ensure that there is no escalation, that message has gone out quite clearly to the international community. You haven't seen too many, foreign diplomats rushing to Delhi and trying to calm India down or publicly castigating India or publicly telling in India how to behave. Nobody's doing that. They said what they have to, and I think the Indians have carried out these strikes, and they're basically having condemned that. All of that shows that there is a recognition of the Indian position that if you are a strategic partner, you must stand by India.
Right. Except for Turkey, I don't think we've seen any condemnation to so-called India's aggression in Pakistan, which is quite a
I think
shift from what
Kazakhstan
we've
or
seen.
I don't know which, one of the Central Asian countries. I'm forgetting the name of that, but I think there is one more country that has stood by the Pakistanis. The others haven't. And in any case, Turkey is not a strategic partner. So,
Yeah, yeah,
I think this
even
applies primarily to India's strategic partners.
right. Even China's response has been quite balanced. Surprisingly, this brings me to my final question. In your article, you mentioned that the military operation marks the end of the old India-Pakistan relationship. With what do you think the future holds for the bilateral ties in terms of diplomacy, trade, and potential conflict resolution?
Notwithstanding what is happening today between the two sides, which is the sort of military action reaction, I'm quite convinced in my mind that unless and until there is an end to terrorism emanating from Pakistan targeted at India, India-Pakistan relations are unlikely to go back to what it used to be for a very long time, which is you have a terror attack, then you have war of words, and then you sort of sit back and talk to each other across the table, and then you sort of come out with a few CBMs and maybe even a composite dialogue / comprehensive dialogue, and rinse and repeat. That cycle sort of repeats. I think we are probably going to see an end to that, cycle, which doesn't really lead to much. Not repeating going forward. You're looking at in my sort of understanding, from what I have seen of the gradual sort of decline in the Indian interest in engaging Pakistan. We've adopted a policy of minimalism when it comes to Pakistan, and that is going to be difficult to sustain. The Indians have said that we are abolishing the post of the air army and naval attaches in India and Pakistan, which means there aren't going to be any more of the servicemen of theirs, ours present in each other's capitals. The high commissioners are not going to go back anytime soon, if ever. The Atari-Wagah border remains closed. The cross-site losses CBMs in Jammu and Kashmir have been suspended. The Indus Waters Treaty is suspended. So the future of India-Pakistan relations, therefore, is going to be bereft of any substantive content. I think in a few months' time, there will be requests from Pakistan to sort of reconsider India's position on the Indus Waters Treaty. That is going to be the negotiating point. That is probably going to be where India will seek concessions from Pakistan. India's ability to extract concessions vis-a-vis reducing terrorism or eliminating terrorism against India from Pakistani side is somewhat limited if India continues to use military force, because Pakistan will use military force against India. The real, I think, bargaining chip here is the Indus Waters Agreement. But that has the ability to starve Pakistan of water over time. And the pain will sort of be slow but steady and will increase over time. And that will force Pakistani side to use interlocutors or back channel communications entreaties to India to undo the harm that keeping the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance is doing to Pakistan. So I see those limited items becoming style of comprehensive composite dialogue coming back, and India-Pakistan relations going back to normal. I have another point to make. But you haven't asked me that. Should I go ahead and make that?
Yes, please.
This is basically about, and I actually tweeted this in the morning as well, and my tweet basically says that there is a great deal of uneasiness in India that Pakistan is, hitting or doing a great job in the conventional space against India by attacking Indian fighter jets or on the line of control and sort of planning to carry out conventional strikes against India. While that may be accurate, I am not disheartened by that. I am not discouraged by that. I believe that the better the Pakistani conventional forces perform, the more space it creates under the nuclear threshold for Delhi to use conventional operations in response to terrorist strikes. Given the context that I explained earlier, which is Pakistan used to use nuclear blackmail against India, nuclear bluff against India. Now, India is saying that India will use conventional forces against subconventional attacks, notwithstanding whether or not Pakistan carries out a counterattack. So if Pakistan does a good job in counterattacking India, attacking India back, it will ensure that nuclear weapons don't come into play. And being a superior economy and superior military power, Pakistan's ability to do harm to India in the conventional space is limited, and nuclear weapons don't come into play. So in the ultimate analysis, therefore, the Pakistanis will not come on top in that sort of conventional standoff between India and Pakistan. I just wanted to put that on the table because there is today a lot of conversation and yesterday about the Pakistanis are doing a fantastic job in the conventional domain, and that's worrisome for India. I see it very differently.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jacob. I think India's military actions may well be a turning point, not just in New Delhi's counterterrorism posture, but in how the region navigates peace, deterrence, and the difficult path between provocation and restraint. Thank you again, Dr. Jacob, for providing us with much needed perspective on how the situation unfolds as we still see tensions running high. Thank you for joining the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Aishwaria, and thank you for having me on the podcast. Enjoy talking to you.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.